I'm delighted to say that we can be joined in just a moment by the Secretary of State for Education, Gillian Keegan. Gillian, thank you so much for joining us here on GB News. Now, around 6% is being offered to public sector workers, doctors and, of course, teachers, your area. But I do wonder, how is this all going to be paid for?
Well, that is actually the big question, of course, because the headline figures are what the independent pay review bodies have recommended, and there's a range of different things they've recommended because they look at each specific situation in great detail. You know, they look at recruitment, retention, they look at pay, they look at the whole package, they look at, you know, equivalent positions, etc. So that it does differ a bit. For teachers, it's 6.5%. In the school budgets that we have with the extra 2 billion that we got recently, they have budgeted 3.5%. So when it came back at 6.5%, that leaves me with a 3% delta difference, which we have had to try and find funding for that, because it's very clear that for teachers particularly, and for head teachers, it's really important that it's funded, because they don't want to have to make, you know, cuts to teaching assistants or school trips or other resources within schools to pay for one pay rise. So we have had to fund that, and that's something that has taken a bit of time. It's been quite difficult, but it's been helped very much by the Treasury. So the Treasury, what they usually do with departments is any spend that you don't make, so if your forecast is too high or you don't deliver as quickly as you thought, and all of those underspends, they always go back to the Treasury and then they reprioritise on behalf of the government. But in this case, they've permitted us to keep those underspends. So what I've been doing is going through line by line every bit of the budget, looking at the forecast, looking at the programmes that we haven't started yet, we could slow down, and that's how we've done it. And
could you give us an example of one of those areas of underspend where the area will be getting less money than had originally been announced? Does this include, for example, some of that catch-up funding?
No, so not that had been announced. Now, catch-up funding is a good example, because in the National Tutoring Fund, it's a demand-led fund, so it's basically called on by all of the schools, and we obviously anticipate how much they would need, and they call it off. If there's anything left there that isn't used, and there was last year and we anticipate there will be this year, then that will move over. But it's nobody has been told that they can't have the funding that they need. So we have, and in fact we've already increased that quite a lot. But there's things like, for example, if we had a new building project, or we were looking at rolling out some additional schools or additional things. If we haven't started those yet, we'll look at whether we actually think we can deliver it. People tend to be quite optimistic with forecasts. Obviously, we've got shortages of construction workers. Sometimes planning takes longer. So we've really gone through line by line. Demand-led things, for example. So there may be a qualification, a new qualification. We're anticipating there'll be so many people who want to study it. Maybe less people come forward. So we've really gone through in painstaking detail to try and make sure we protect the frontline budgets without and making sure we can afford the pay.
Gillian, you talk about shortages in the economy in terms of the labour market. You said construction workers, but we've also got a shortage with teachers, and this is something that parents are very concerned about, and teachers themselves, of course, are very concerned about. 40,000 teachers resigned from state schools last year, further 4,000 retired. That's a lot of the workforce leaving. Is 6.5% pay increase, is that enough to keep teachers interested in this profession? I feel like there's something more going on here. Why are so many teachers leaving?
Well, first of all, there are always a percentage of teachers that leave. A lot of them go off and retire, some of them go off into other professions. It's actually been quite stable over the years, so it might sound like a lot, but if you look at, we've got over 500,000 teachers, way over 500,000 teachers, so if you look at it in terms of percentage terms, it's actually been quite stable. However, obviously what we want to do is make sure that we retain every teacher that wants to stay, and also we recruit more teachers. One of the things that we're bringing forward, which was a manifesto commitment, is increasing the starting salaries for graduate teachers to £30,000 outside of London from September this year. So that's something we committed in the manifesto. I think it's a competitive graduate salary, and that's something that we'll be introducing from September. We do have a lot of applicants for teaching as well, but what we've always struggled with is certain subjects. So we are also introducing bursaries, additional tax-free payments for certain subjects in certain areas. So maths is one, physics, computer science is often one, where you're competing with businesses for the same skills. So we do have additional bursaries, scholarships and payments for certain specific subjects. And what I've also asked them to look at is a degree apprenticeship for teaching for those subjects, because I think that's also would broaden the pipeline of people who can access teaching as a profession.
Now, yesterday when the Prime Minister was announcing the pay rises, not just in education, but of course across the board, in the NHS as well, particularly, we were told that there would be new charges on migrants, both on visas and on the health surcharge, and this would help part fund some of those pay rises. But I'm finding it very, very difficult to find any numbers attached to that. How much does the government expect these extra charges on migrants will actually raise?
I think it's about £1 billion. I think that the numbers are around about £1 billion. I think the total we have to find across all the departments around about £5 billion. In the case of education, over the 2 years, it's just under £2 billion, because as well as the teachers, we've also introduced a fund for maybe smaller schools, because obviously I look at everything on averages, but there could be some schools where they are struggling because of falling roles or specific circumstances. So I've increased the sort of fund to support those schools, so if they are in financial difficulty, so that's another £40 million. And then for the first time, actually, we've also put more money for retention and recruitment into the FE sector. So that's 185 million in the first year, 285 million in the second year. So that's my bit of it. I think in total it's about 5 billion, and I think the additional surcharges, I think, are about £1 billion of that.
I think it's good to hear that, you know, this isn't going to be paid for by massive tax increases on us, but it does seem to be slightly worrying that we might be seeing cuts in departmental spending when schools are already complaining of shortages and difficulties. But let's move on to one of the things that you wanted to talk to us today about. So students looking to work in the UK's growing space sector have something to look forward to, is that right?
That's right. So what we're launching is a Space Systems Engineer degree apprenticeship. I don't know if you know, but I'm a huge fan of degree apprenticeships. I did one myself. I'm the only degree apprentice in the House of Commons. And one of the things I brought to the role as Apprenticeships and Skills Minister and now as Secretary of State for Education is a huge focus on higher level and degree apprenticeships, because they are a brilliant way for any young person or for any older person that wants to access a career to be able to get a job, earn, learn, get their degree paid for or their higher technical qualification paid for as well, and really get on in the workplace. They're brilliant for social mobility, they're brilliant for access, they're brilliant for older people that want to, for example, go into teaching. But today's is the Space Systems Engineer degree apprenticeship, and I just know I met quite a few degree apprentices yesterday. It will start in September 2024, so there's a number of businesses that will offer this. I just think it's really exciting. You know, space is something we're really good at, and it's really exciting to be able to offer those easy, accessible and supported routes into a fantastic industry for the next generation.
That does sound really exciting, although I can't help notice that we did fail to launch the first domestic space launch only a few months ago. Perhaps with some of these apprenticeships and people going through these degree apprenticeships, perhaps we'll actually get something off the ground from this country finally.
Don't be defeatist.
I am pretty sure they will. I am pretty sure they will. I mean, obviously, when you're doing something ambitious like space, you can't expect it to work first time all the time. But I am 100% sure that there are so many young people that have got so much to offer to this industry, and they've got now great roots into it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they can produce. Space fascinates us all, so I'm looking forward to seeing the UK's position in space be strengthened.
Well, Gillian Keegan, Education Secretary, thank you so much for joining us here on Britain's Newsroom this morning.